And first up, we have Professor Jason Potts, and we were just discussing briefly there. I asked him how long it's been since he was a communist, and he said it's coming up to nearly 20 years now, so that means he's about 19 years ahead of Brendan still, but we'll get to that later. But anyway, Jason is a professor of economics at RMIT, and he is one of the senior economists in this country that believes in freedom, which means of all five that are still left in academia, he's one of the most senior of them. But anyway, please make Jason feel welcome to the stage.
All right, thank you. So what we're going to do is, I'll sort of introduce our team just very quickly, but I like this protocol of you've all got the introductions in your thing. So we've got Darcy Allen, IPA, PhD student. We've got Brendan Markey-Towler from UQ, who'll talk to us about artificial intelligence. And we've got Naomi Brockwell, who you've already heard from already, but what we haven't heard from is we're talking about Bitcoin and blockchain. So she'll be discussing that, and then we'll get through this and then open things up for discussion. Look, so this session's on innovation and technology, and everyone likes talking about that, but what we want to focus on is why is innovation and technology an issue for libertarians or classical liberals or however we're self-identifying now, because it's not obvious that it is, right? It's just a thing that's in the world, and we want to sort of think about why technology and technology policy is a concern for libertarians.
Speaking to the mic, Jason.
All right. So the basic issue here is that for economists and for policy, the reason that technology and innovation policy is an issue is this basic argument that innovation and technology causes economic growth. And that's a good thing, because economic growth causes increases in GDP, and that's a good thing, because increases in GDP increases tax revenue, and that's the reason that we can then think about the significance of government having an issue, being involved in this. And what the sort of standard argument is that we want more of these good things, we want more innovation and technology and so on, because we want more wealth and prosperity and happiness and all of the things that brings. And there's three buts in this story. And the first but is we want more innovation and technology because of all of the good things that brings, but market failure. And that's the beginning of the reason that this is a libertarian issue. The standard sort of economic argument that gives us such things as public universities and the CSIRO and R&D tax policy and industry policy and not millions, not billions, but kind of trillions of dollars that is spent globally as government transfers in this story is an economic argument around market failure. It just says, for many things, most things you can leave to the free competitive markets, except the things that are public goods. And one of the key sort of maneuvers that takes place is this idea that innovation and new technology are public goods, that they experience market failure. And that's the thin edge of the wedge and that we need to sort of think through. Because once you've diagnosed something as being a public good subject to market failure, what you've effectively said is that competitive free markets can't deliver this thing in the efficient quantities that you want, right? And now we've got our concern. So what do you do? Well, that then gives, we need government policy to fix that market failure problem, right? So that's kind of the standard, largely still unquestioned argument that I think we don't pay enough attention to this. So this is of course we like innovation, of course we like new technology, of course we need government to do something about it. That doesn't follow. And I want to explain why. So the argument here is so that's the first but market failure. The second but is, but if there wasn't government involvement in this, providing R&D tax subsidies and public universities and backing intellectual property, and that's a complex story, but there would be no technology and therefore no growth, and therefore we wouldn't get the thing that we want, which is economic performance. Again, that's just empirically nonsense. It's one of these things that looks and feels right when you focus on the charismatic mega technologies. Right? So if we look at sort of nuclear power or things that involve very large public investments that look like natural monopolies, or the latest one is solar technology. We want more of that. More of that is good, therefore market failure. There's not enough investment, there's not enough private investment in these things. And that's the diagnosis that gets made. If there's a lack of private investment in the thing that we want that was seen to be good for society, the diagnosis becomes that's therefore market failure, therefore government subsidy transfer to correct this thing. What often doesn't happen is the focus on, well, if you buy that argument, what about software? There's whole other sectors that are doing perfectly well, enormously high-tech sectors that have not been subject to these private investment failures. So we can start making lists and compare. Well, there's counter examples on that. But the point I want to make here is that the way that this argument is set up is it looks like there's an investment problem in developing new technology, and that's the market failure of the private investment. If we solve that, we get the new technology and the future. The argument that I'm going to represent and will be echoed down this line is that private or investment isn't the issue. What is the issue is discovery of value. It's entrepreneurial discovery of value is really the issue with new technologies. It's not private investment to who will pay for my research laboratory. It's how do we discover what people want? Right? That's the economic problem. It's an entrepreneurial problem. It's not it's not an investment problem, it's an entrepreneurial market discovery problem. And this is the beginning of sort of re-diagnosing the economics of new technology, is that it's not a transfer of resources, there's not enough investment going in this thing, and we can shift it around through taxation to get it to where it needs to go so we can have the future. What the issue is how do we create the institutions that we need in order to discover the value, the value of new technology so we can put them to use. And that's the source of economic growth. So that's the second but is if no government, then no technology nonsense. The third but is in order to solve this economic problem of new technology and innovation, we have to be able to try new things. We have to be able to do things that haven't been done before. We have to do things that might impinge upon what is already being done in unknown ways, right? And that sort of discovery aspect is I think the core of this issue of the libertarian, classical liberal perspective on technology and innovation is, as Mike Munger mentioned yesterday, it's about permissionless innovation. It's about the requirement to permission innovation, the requirement to permission doing of new things is the main barrier to new technology and innovation. And it's the diagnosis, the issue here is it's not if only we had enough investment, we would lead the world in developing new technology, and countries that can invest a lot will win. What the real issue here is it's countries that are free to experiment will have new technologies and societies that will develop these innovation and new technology. And that's the issue. The issue is not investment, the issue is permissioning. So that's the sort of the thing I want to sort of think through. And so that's what we mean by this notion of permissionless innovation, that the real innovation policy is not the transfer of funds from one group of people to another group of people to do the thing. The real issue is about deregulation of existing things to enable experimentation to take place, to enable an institutional environment that is basically safe for entrepreneurship. So that's essentially the argument that we represent in terms of what is the economics of innovation, new technology here. Just a few quick things that what this looks like, what permissionless innovation looks like. I mean, this argument was set out by Adam Thiera at George Mason, or at Mercator Center, I think, put this together. But it's kind of become a thing that we want to focus on. A lot of stuff that you wouldn't think of as innovation and technology policy or innovation and technology issues are. First one is occupational licensing. Licensing that locks down the definition of a job or a career or of of a service is effectively anti-technology innovation. Anti-technology regulation. Health and safety regulations that are designed to prohibit bad things from happening have the unintended consequence of prohibiting experimentation. A lot of health and safety type regulations and this need, the precautionary principle as a test case, are basically anti-technology regulation, anti-technology policy, and anti-innovation policy. So these are the way of thinking about this is in terms of the enemies of innovation. Not so much what can we do to promote innovation and new technologies, but what can we do to basically reduce the amount of impediments to entrepreneurial experimentation and discovery of value. So companies like Uber and Airbnb, we're all familiar with the problems that they're going through. It's not just them. This is a general problem that exists for all new technologies. All right, so I'll end with just a thought. What this then means is that this really is the fight, and the policy issue that we should be thinking about is basically deregulation as innovation policy rather than public spending as innovation policy. And the historical consequence of this is that free societies have always been technologically advanced societies. And that's not, and has never been, because those free societies have awesome innovation policies. And explicitly, it's not because they have great universities. It's not because they have great CSIRO type departments. Those are things you can buy with a wealthy, rich economy. Free societies have always been technologically advanced, in essence because they are less resistant to new ideas. And that's the policy reframing that I think needs to take place at a much more fundamental level. It's not about spending priorities, it's about deregulation and enabling increasing use of the court systems to sort of deal with harms after the event. It's around sunset clauses being built in. It's about sort of essentially what is a moral and cultural perspective on being tolerant and having forbearance to just wait and see what the consequences of something new will be before we try and shut it down and regulate it. So with that, I'll hand it over to Darcy, who will talk about...
Very similar things.
Very similar things, yes. All right.